We're seeing the gruesome images which are causing brain damage to so many people from having to see the most horrible images they've ever witnessed. Today I saw a child with his arm blown off. Never seen that before. Just crying and screaming. They're causing serious political disruptions in this country, as well as the policy of manufactured starvation. Israel's manufacturing of a famine in Gaza to starve an entire population either to death or into leaving or into complying to orders to move into what will be a concentration camp in southern Gaza. And I think this is causing outrage, not just in the traditional quarters of the American left that have organized for Palestine, but within Trump's base as well, among people who are under 45, who are on social media. And it's reaching parts of the Democratic Party that it hadn't before. Like, it's starting to become a kind of humanitarian cause that people who had tuned out Palestine as kind of radical left noise are forced to pay attention to. So first, I think we need to understand what's actually happening in Gaza right now before we address the political backlash in Washington, where, prominent pro-Israel Democrats and even pro-Israel neocons are being forced to acknowledge some degree of genocide is taking place in Gaza. Here's a video of what it's like to get aid in Gaza for the 85% of the population that is now food insecure. This is one of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation hubs. It's being filmed by people who are trying to get a box of the insufficient food that this criminal Israeli and US-backed Trump-tied enterprise is providing. This is a guy who I think has been shot and wounded. This guy's hearing impaired. This is the real life Hunger Games. I mean, that's just a slice of what it's like. 12 people were killed yesterday at a Gaza Humanitarian Foundation hub. Over 1,000 have been killed trying to get aid. You can hear the gunfire from Israeli tanks. Quadricopters are used to kill people. And a former Gaza Humanitarian Foundation guard has spoken out for the first time about what they saw while supposedly providing security at one of these concentration camp-like hubs.
You're a veteran of the United States Army who has been deployed to combat 12 times, 4 different wars. I've never in my entire military career have I been a part of, allowed, or bystander to the use of force against unarmed innocent civilians. Ever. And I'm not going to do it now.
This is from an Israeli report. Let's move ahead.
I don't have any accountability. And the Israeli Defense Force engineers built the sites and decided where they would be. In reality, the sites put the population at a great disadvantage and put the population in danger.
You keep saying that the location of the distribution site are in areas which are far from the Palestinian population, and that creates one of the key problems. Can you explain why?
The sites were not set up in locations, nor were they set up in a way that was conducive to distributing or delivering humanitarian aid to a needy population. Thought of, the Palestinians can just come down here and get the aid. Well, 40-pound boxes, couldn't have vehicles, couldn't have cars. They're on foot. Most of them don't have shoes, no water, going through active war zone areas. As the Palestinians were finishing getting the aid that was on the site, the UG Solutions personnel began shooting in their direction, shooting at them, shooting at their feet, shooting into the berms to get them to leave.
While you were in Gaza, you have...
So before Israel began completely cutting off aid, the aid trucks into Gaza, after they resumed the slaughter in Gaza following the failed, unenforced U.S. Steve Witkoff ceasefire after Donald Trump came in, there were 400 sites maintained by the UN. I mean, and this was like throughout the war. Now there's one maintained by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. They had 3, and now there's 1. And Israel has divided Gaza into several sectors. They have the Netzarim corridor of death, so people from the north can't get down to the first site, the only site, which is east of Rafah, in the middle of some desert. And then people have to walk for kilometers and kilometers, 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers through an active war zone in order to get these boxes. And then they have to be able to carry the boxes back. And the boxes are just thrown out for them. There's no means of organizing people except by shooting at them. Untrained U.S. mercenaries who speak no Arabic are guarding these sites. And as we've shown with UG Solutions video at the Grayzone, then they call in the Israeli army for support, and then they start shooting everyone. The soldiers have said they even use quadricopters, dropping grenades and bombs on Palestinian civilians in order to enforce evacuation orders. So what would they do at these sites? They're killing hundreds of people. It is the most satanic use of humanitarian aid as cover for genocide. And that one Gaza Humanitarian Foundation site will be the basis for the concentration camp that Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has announced, where 500,000 people will be concentrated and they won't be allowed to leave unless they agree to leave Gaza entirely. Now, 115 international aid groups, basically any international aid group you can think of, has signed a statement describing food shortages in Gaza as mass starvation as the Israeli government siege starves the people of Gaza. I mean, this is just like mainstream, undeniable. Save the Children, Doctors Without Borders, Oxfam International, the whole NGO industrial complex. This is what happens when you break the entire UN system, besiege Gaza, and there are hundreds and hundreds of aid trucks lined up for miles waiting to get into Gaza, which are not allowed to get in because Israel will bomb them.
And what are they saying now? Instead of letting those aid trucks in, they're going to allow some other countries to do airdrops.
Yeah.
It was a scheme that was already done, but it was a stunt that was already done before when Biden was in office. And that ended up killing people, with aid dropping on people and killing them. And of course, meager amounts even getting in through airdrops because it's the most impractical solution possible. And it's only a stunt to cover up the fact that they're blocking all the aid from coming in. It's right there, loaded up on trucks. And you're seeing now people who've been denying there was famine, denying starvation, now being forced to admit it because it's getting so absolutely sick.
Well, we'll get to that.
That it can't be denied anymore. And for many people, even if they do get food now, it'll be too late because they're at that stage of starvation where actually it's too late, where the damage is already done. Even if they survive, the people will be suffering with irreversible conditions because of the starvation that they've endured.
And so in order to push back, it's really shocking. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, AIPAC, the Trump administration are now pushing this lie that it's the UN's fault. This is Mondo Weiss. showing what AIPAC is doing, but basically for the first time the Israeli military brought reporters to the frontier of Gaza, to Kerem Shalom, the Kerem Shalom crossing, and AIPAC is basically showing what was shown to the reporters, which demonstrates how much of a PR stunt this was, and says the food, medicine, and aid are in Gaza. The UN won't distribute it. Hundreds of truckloads are sitting there. The trucks are loaded. Demand they deliver. Well, the UN is demanding they deliver. They're not allowed to deliver. Israel will not allow them in. This isn't in Gaza, by the way. This is all under Israeli control. So it's just a straight up lie. And they're going to do anything they can to continue starving the population of Gaza.
On Substack, that link is below. All right, guys, let's get it. So let's start with this. Let me give you some updates about what's happening in Gaza. So Dropsite News, and they also do phenomenal work. Everybody go subscribe to Dropsite. But they pointed out that in May, you had an Israeli politician say the following, quote, "Tonight we killed nearly 100 people from Gaza, and no one cares, because everyone has become used to the fact that 100 Palestinians can be killed in a single night." So that's something that was said in May by an Israeli politician, basically bragging about the fact that people have gotten used to the genocide, and as long as you just kill 100 or fewer Palestinians a day, it won't make the news in the West, people won't talk about it too much, and they can continue down this path. And in fact, we've seen this strategy when it comes to this new fake aid group, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. It's a CIA Mossad op, and they basically lure Palestinians to come to certain areas and promise them food and medicine, and then they open fire and kill them. That's what's been happening, okay? So they end up listing here all the people that have died because of this scheme. So they say, as Israel presses for a ceasefire captive deal on its terms, it has sharply escalated indiscriminate attacks across civilian targets in Gaza. In the 3 weeks leading up to the current negotiations, the Palestinian Ministry of Health reports nearly 1,900 killed and over 7,500 wounded. That's in 3 weeks. That's in 3 weeks. And then they break down day by day. 304 injured this day, 332 injured this day, and you go down the list. 80 killed, 70 killed, 138 killed, 118 killed. So that guy wasn't kidding when he said, look, we could kill 100 people a day and nobody bats an eyelash. So this is what we've been watching. I've been seeing this on my timeline on a daily basis. We've been covering it. I know you guys have been seeing it as well on your timeline on a daily basis. And all of us are ripping our fucking hair out going, this has got to stop. Like, how do we get this to stop? This has to stop. We are live streaming a genocide in 4K all day, every day, and everybody's just going about their lives like it's not happening. All right, so now at the same time, I need to share this with you, and warning, this is, I'm going to play it for you, or at least some of it for you, and this is incredibly disturbing, incredibly hard to watch, but the IDF was caught on literal camera graping a Palestinian prisoner that they had. And this is something that has been a crisis. This has been continuous. It's been happening over and over. In fact, it wasn't that long ago that the Israeli population, you had protesters who were arguing for the right to grape. Because there was an IDF member who graped a Palestinian, and there was an investigation launched into that criminal attack, and Israelis came out into the streets in support of the grapist. And it was viewed as the right to grape protest. Absolutely super disturbing. Well, now, like I said, here's your warning in advance. I'll only play a little bit of it for you, but we literally have the video of this assault happening. By the way, this woman was injured. She had some horrific injuries as a result of this sexual assault. Here's a little piece of it before I turn it off, because as I said, it's very difficult. So you see, the IDF soldiers are literally creating some sort of a formation to block what's happening. And what's happening is grape. Behind that. Again, this is stuff that we're seeing. This is stuff that we're seeing. Just like we saw, the IDF attacking UN buildings. We saw them bombing schools. We saw them bombing hospitals. We see them murdering paramedics, then bulldozing over them, putting them in a mass grave, and then lying about it after the fact. Any horrible thing you could think of. People being shot point blank in the head. Children being shot in the head. It's a nightmare. What we're witnessing is a nightmare. We're witnessing the worst of humanity in real time, all day, every day. And again, the world has seemingly gotten used to it. So I also want to show you this poll. A Hebrew University poll shows that roughly 82% of Jewish Israelis agree with the genocidal idea that there, quote, are no innocents in Gaza. Let me repeat that. 82% of Jewish Israelis say there are no innocents in Gaza. That is an indictment on Israeli society, full stop. That makes it fair to call Israel a bloodthirsty, psychopathic, genocidal state. And you will not see anybody try to grapple with this reality and the fact that this is not the only poll that shows this. I remember the poll when it was already very clear that we were witnessing a genocide. Only 4% of the Israeli public said, hey, I think the IDF has gone too far. So, I mean, it's really been a shock to the system watching what's happened in Gaza, because it really reminds you that we have not evolved since the old days, right? We have not, like, people like to look back at World War II and go, oh man, those crazy days where you had some psychopath doing a total genocide and, like, it went on for a while and eventually there was a war to stop it. But, like, here we are now. Not only is a genocide happening, it's being live streamed, and the U.S. is arming it and funding it and supporting the nation that does it, right? And they smear you if you oppose it, as we saw with Zoran, for example. Well, guess what? I am not alone. You are not alone. Reasonable people across this country have woken up to what's going on. And let's be serious. You don't even need to follow the news that closely to see, holy shit, this is wrong. Holy shit, this is evil. Holy shit, this needs to stop. So we have some new polling about how Democrats feel about Israel. And man, this says everything. Watch this.
Andrew Cuomo, during the primary, attacked Mondani as being insufficiently pro-Israel. I'm not quite sure the former governor understood how much the politics have changed around this issue among Democrats. What are we talking about here? All right, who Democrats sympathize more with, Israelis or Palestinians? In 2017, the Democratic Party was a pro-Israeli party. Look at this. They sympathized with the Israelis by 13 points, more with the Israelis than the Palestinians. But look at this sea change. Now Democrats sympathize more with the Palestinians by 43 points. Oh my God, that is a change in the margin of 56 points over the course of just 8 years. So all of a sudden, it's the pro-Palestinian position that actually reigns supreme in Democratic politics, not the Israeli position. And that is part of the reason why Mondani was able to do so well in this primary, because those attacks over Israel, simply put, did not ring true for Democrats. They're now on the side of the Palestinians, not the Israelis.
I mean, this is a much bigger issue, specifically with Mondani, though. I mean, an outspoken critic of Israel. He's facing continued criticism, though, for not being outspoken enough against anti-Semitism, that is for sure.
That's a total smear, by the way. The idea that he's not sufficiently against anti-Semitism, that is complete and utter bullshit. And this is what happens in this country when you are unapologetically in favor of Palestinian human rights and freedom and liberation. They smear you as being an anti-Semite. That's the only trick they have. Saying you're Hamas, saying you're an anti-Semite. And the cheap tricks, simply put, are not working anymore.
Democrats and how broadly how this really is shifting.
Yeah, so, you see this among Democrats overall, right? But we know that Mondani's base was younger voters within the Democratic Party. And so I want to break it down for you.
With younger Democrats.
Correct. So take a look here. Who age 18 to 49 Democrats sympathize more with, the Israelis or the Palestinians? Again, in 2017, younger Democrats sympathize more with the Israelis by 14 points. Look at this shift now. Palestinians, they sympathize more with the Palestinians by 57 points. That is an over 70-point shift in the margin in just a matter of 8 years. So the bottom line is, Mondani's base within the Democratic Party and the base of the Democratic Party of younger voters, younger Democrats, have changed tremendously on this issue in 8 years' time. I rarely ever see shifts like this, Kate, in which you see one side of the equation leading by 14 points 8 years ago, and then all of a sudden the other side of the equation leading by 57 points. The bottom line is the politics around the Israelis and the Palestinians have shifted tremendously among Democrats, and they've shifted specifically tremendously among Democrats who are under the age of 50, younger Democrats from Mondani's base, and also the base of Democratic socialists like himself, like Bernie Sanders, like AOC. They have just shifted more so than I think that anyone could possibly have imagined, say, 8 years ago.
So understand something, guys. This is a sea change. And the bottom line is, AIPAC cannot demagogue, cannot propagandize, cannot gaslight with impunity anymore. It used to be the case they could dump millions of dollars into a race, and that money alone would drown out the opponents, the more pro-Palestine people who they don't want to win. Now, I don't know if the money alone is enough. There's a reason why in the last election, AIPAC spent a lot of money, but all of their ads never mentioned Israel in Democratic primaries. There's a reason for that. And now, that money is a curse. That money comes across as what it is, a fucking bribe from a psychotic lobby that is pro-genocide. And so it looks to me, and you guys can say if you disagree or not, but it looks to me like the Democratic base has caught on to this bullshit. They understand the game that's being played. They understand the Israel lobby has a lot of money. They're immensely powerful. They control the narrative. They spin stuff. They smear people who are pro-Palestine and anti-genocide. And I don't think it's going to work anymore. I don't think it's going to work. You see, establishment Democrats are running on fucking fumes, y'all. Bill Clinton came out and endorsed Cuomo for the New York City Democratic primary race. Bill Clinton. And what happened? Cuomo got his cheeks clapped in front of the world. And Mamdani, Cruz, everybody thought, myself included, that, Mamdani has a chance. But obviously, in the first round, Cuomo's going to get the most votes. And then, once you do the calculations for ranked choice voting, in the second round, Mamdani can win. But no, he won in the first round. This is a guy who's unapologetically pro-Palestine, who calls what's happening correctly a genocide. And the question is that limited to, this is New York Democrats, it's its own beast? Or is this more widespread than anybody realizes? And in this moment, I think it's definitely more widespread than anybody realizes. And that's good, because that says in the midterms and in the next Democratic primary, the candidates that are going to win are going to be pro-Palestine, they're going to call out the genocide, and they're going to be tougher on Trump. They're going to be, Zoran Mamdani's out there, I'm a democratic socialist. That's what he says, right? Just like Bernie. Bernie was the only one in politics that used to say that. And for a long time, even I said, hey, dog, soften that a little bit, call yourself a social democrat. We're at the point now where, no, you don't even have to call yourself a social democrat instead of a democratic socialist. You're probably better off if you just say, I'm a democratic socialist. The political reality has shifted. Democrats are radicalized. And what's happened within the past 2 years has broken a lot of people, woken them up, and now they're going, holy shit. Holy shit. We need some serious change in this world, and it's not going to come from status quo, incremental bullshit. It's just not going to come. Now, by the way, at the same time, what are they doing over on Fox News? Look at how they talk about this same issue. Ready?
People get to know him, and I'm hopeful more people get to know him, the more we'll make sure that he is rejected at the ballot box come November.
Yeah, that's right. Well, November's a long way away. Congresswoman, thank you for joining us, of course. A disturbing new poll reveals that the growing anti-Semitism on the left in 2017, 42% of Democrats supported Israel, but that has completely flipped, and now just 12% of Democrats support the Jewish state. So unfortunately, it's not surprising Democrats elected Mamdani to represent them.
So, did you see how they framed that? They said it's anti-Semitism. These numbers show that Democratic voters are anti-Semites. That it was 42% of them that supported Israel in 2017, but now it's only 12% of them. They say that's growing anti-Semitism on the left. It's insane to me that anybody thinks this cheap trickery and deceit will work. Like, I'm sorry, but unless you're a dying boomer with fucking lead poisoning, you're going to hear that and go, what? Just because you sympathize more with Palestinians in the Israel-Palestine conflict, that means you're an anti-Semite? Guys, they have nothing left. They have nothing left. When you live stream a genocide for over a year, like, what do you think's going to happen? What do you think's going to happen? I mean, how many stories do we have to hear of, like, babies being starved to death and innocent people being carpet bombed? Like, at some point, everybody wakes up to it and goes, okay, I see what's happening here, and there's nothing you could say. There's no string of words you could put together that's going to make me feel bad about being pro-Palestine and being anti-Israel. They're literally doing a genocide and playing the victim at the same time as they do it. So, Democratic voters are waking up. They are completely and utterly done with Israel. I mean, guys, look at this. Only 12% of the Democratic voters say I sympathize more with Israel than Palestine. Only 12%. 12%. That is unbelievable. That is unbelievable. So, as I said, I'm not alone. You're not alone. Everybody's waking up. And we got to stop the genocide. And we have to elect people who have basic... This is the thing, man. Like, this issue is literally a litmus test. A basic moral litmus test. And I'm sorry, but if you can't pass this test, you belong nowhere near power. Nowhere near. Because this is like... I mean, shit. This is the mathematical equivalent of 2 + 2 = 4. Like, if you can't get this one right, I don't trust your judgment on fucking anything, right? As Ta-Nehisi Coates said, If you can't draw a line at genocide, what makes you think they'll draw a line at protecting democracy? Right? So it's the same thing. Oh, if you can't stand up to say genocide is bad and wrong, you're not going to stand up when fucking Donald Trump tries to stay in office after 2028. So you got to elect fighters, you got to elect truth tellers, you got to elect people with a basic bare minimum moral compass. Zoran is a shot across the bow. And now it's time to create thousands of Zorons all across this country. And it's time for Democratic voters to wake up, embrace the radicalization, and realize that's the only way to save this country, bro. It's the only way to save this country. No more mealy-mouthed, middle ground, compromise, negotiation, decorum, nonsense, bullshit. It's time to go all in.
I'm Naomi Klein, and today we are going to get unshocked about an economy that is booming off of annihilation. During the past 20 months of Israel's onslaught on Gaza, there are two words that have been deemed some of the most controversial in the English language. Those words, of course, are genocide and settler colonialism. Two terms that go hand in hand in describing Israel's deliberate onslaught of Gaza and its people, and the system that paved the way for this extraordinary level of violence and displacement. Of course, the people who have insisted on naming Israel's systems of settler colonialism and genocide have been swiftly attacked by pro-Israel politicians and mainstream media, accused of exaggeration, oversimplification, and of course, accused of trafficking in anti-Semitic smears, as if real violence was in the words, not in the violence that the words are describing. Well, last week, UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese cut through the deflections and histrionics with some cold, hard facts, revealing just how accurate, just how precise these terms are when applied to Israel's attacks. In her landmark report, From Economy of Occupation to Economy of Genocide, Albanese takes the framework of settler colonialism, defined as the displacement of one people and the replacement of them by another, and uses it to explain Israel's actions. More than that, she shows that this system of displacing, replacing, and erasing of Palestinians is an economy in and of itself. She reports on major corporations aiding, abetting, and directly profiting from Israel's war crimes. Albanese describes genocide as lucrative for many. The power of the report is in its bare-bones directness. Like the lawyer she is, Albanese comes with facts and figures, names, numbers, and addresses. Now, she's clear that this is not about a list, it's about a system. That said, the report does name almost 50 complicit corporations, and it goes in depth, explaining how these businesses help uphold Israel's ultimate goal of expelling Palestinians from their land and replacing them with Jewish Israelis. Francesca Albanese is one of the world's most respected legal scholars and has been the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights for the occupied territories since 2022. She has been an outspoken critic of Israel's genocide on Gaza, and she joins me now. Welcome to Unshocked, Francesca.
Thanks so much for having me. It's such an honor.
Well, you are a hero to so many Zeteo subscribers, viewers, listeners. You are most welcome here. So a central part of your findings in this report goes back to Israel's history as a quote-unquote startup nation, a tech superpower. And of course, this is very entangled with 9/11 in the United States and the real explosion of the security state. So you mentioned a lot of other industries besides tech in your report, and we're going to get into those like finance and tourism. But the tech part of Israel's economy seems to me really central to why Tel Aviv's stock exchange has boomed, even as large parts of Israel's economy have been in free fall since October 7th. So I want to start with the idea of the startup nation, what it means, and what you mean when you talk about the dark side of startup nation. Why is it so important to the economy of genocide?
Absolutely. So first of all, I wanna explain that this investigation the investigation that was led to the report from economy of occupation to economy of genocide was prompted by the fact that I've realized over time that private interests, like companies, businesses, were entangled with the occupation, but I had no idea of what I would delve into when I started. And indeed, by mapping all the actors, all the entities that I received information about, and then I started to investigate, I realized that there was a mosaic that needed to be completed like a puzzle and given to the public.
Liking this video? Then don't just watch, hit like, share and subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to Zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
So there is a system that over time Israel has put in place, which is made of using what is out there, including businesses, to advance a logic, or a twofold logic of displacement and replacement. And while there are certain sectors, like the military sector, which is intuitively more, naturally, organically related to Israel's occupation, the tech one is not. And the tech one is what has thrived throughout the past 30, 40 years in particular. So while reading Anthony Lowenstein, for example, Palestine Laboratory, I had this epiphany. I did understand what he means when he says the military system is the backbone of the Israeli state and the Israeli economy. Yeah, but this has changed. Today, the technology is part of that system, and Israel has used the Palestinians to experiment, literally to experiment technologies from military surveillance to the agribusiness industry that then has marketed and sold. And this explains why in the past 20 months, while Israel transitioned from an economy of occupation to an economy of genocide, meaning profiting from what he was doing in Gaza, but also in the rest of the West Bank, military companies, but the tech companies have been profiteering from what Israel was doing. And this is why I say this is in and of itself the dark side of the startup nation that is so embedded, so intimately related to the military industry aims and gains that Israel pursues.
So you write in the report that Israel's, this is the quote, forever occupation has become the ideal testing ground for arms manufacturers and big tech, providing significant supply and demand, little oversight, and zero accountability. So I want to go deeper into this idea of treating Palestine as a laboratory, as you said, particularly when it comes to this integration of artificial intelligence and warfare, which we're told again and again is the future of warfare. What does this actually mean on the ground, and how important do you think it is to these huge tech companies that you're naming in the report?
Yeah. Look, over time, we have realized that technology, and especially artificial intelligence, was becoming critical and necessary to the repression to the suppression of Palestinian freedoms and their repression. Think, for example, of what Amnesty International years ago revealed as an automated apartheid, meaning an apartheid regime made of physical closures and automated checkpoints, collection of biometrics that could be stored in systems that would be accessible both to soldiers and settlers through the Blue Wolf, White Wolf, and Red Wolf system, which is basically a way to spy on the Palestinian 24 out of 7, that has been tested on them, used as a repression tool, and then sold, marketed. I mean, not necessarily as Blue Wolf, but as it has generated a number of spying programs. And so we already had an idea of that. Now, this system that has allowed to follow Palestinians wherever they are, both in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip, through their phones, through their access to Meta platforms, for example, or even when they use their credit cards, because all data were gathered in the same place, has been used ordinarily also as a way to pressure Palestinians, to turn them into collaborators, for example. But since October 2023, as a way to track them and then to target them. This is the thing, is that both technology has been offered or has offered itself to Israel to really read without any restraints any private data of the Palestinians. Big tech companies have given full access to Israel and the Israeli army, to Palestinian private information and data, and they would allow them to track anyone in Gaza who could be remotely associated to Hamas, including doctors, civil servants, and this has been a punitive measure. But also think of how technology has been used to prompt an evolution, a sophistication, I say, quote unquote, of the destructive capacity of weaponry, the unmanned drones, or the quadcopters that have been following Palestinians in Gaza and killing them. Primary victims have been children because they have less intuitive capacity to hide themselves from this monstrosity. So and it has been a vicious cycle, because then the weaponry and the technology coupled together have become more and more destructive, and at the same time provided a greater opportunity to be used so as to detach the decision maker, the soldier or the commander or the general taking the decision, from the responsibility of committing a given act, because this is what unmanned technology is for.
Right. And this whole cloud of big data, so you can't necessarily pinpoint which technology is contributing, because they're all contributing. Listening to you, Francesca, I'm struck. I remember, I'm old enough to remember when it was a moral crisis for tech companies to be doing business in China, because China might use an AOL account or a Yahoo account to find a dissident and arrest them. And here we are talking about a total integration of civilian tech and military tech used not just to assassinate the individual, but maybe blow up an entire building. So, I want to talk about Palantir, because, of course, this is a company that is in your report, and it's also becoming increasingly controversial in the U.S. because of its outsized role in the Trump administration. You write in the report that there are reportedly, quote, reasonable grounds to believe that they have provided Israel with critical defense infrastructure during this war, including their AI platform, which allows for the automated decision-making that you were just speaking about. They've, of course, denied these claims. In addition, you mentioned that they have openly embraced their partnership with Israel, announcing last year in Tel Aviv that as an act of quote unquote solidarity, they were there. And in April, when Palantir's CEO was asked about their technology killing Palestinians, he responded saying, quote, mostly terrorists, that's true. So this kind of open zeal for violence, I think, is something new, at least in the era of big tech. For the past decade or so, we've all heard the progressive claims made by U.S. tech companies, wanting a facade, at least, of having a socially responsible brand. What do you think we're seeing with Palantir? Is this a broader shift in the industry? What do you make of this open embrace of their role in Israel's genocidal campaign?
Look, it's so interesting to have this discussion with you, because I think that we are in the post-shock doctrine era. You have called the capacity of changing, provoking sudden changes through the need to respond to an emergency. So having or seeking to have political gains and produce certain changes in order to convince everyone that you're pursuing something else that is legitimate. So what we are seeing now is that, we have lost all sense of limits and moral compass, in the sense that while privacy and a principle of precaution in both political and military action have both gone down the drain, no one cares anymore. Therefore, so the Palantir has gone hand in hand with the Israel's license logic that the end justified all means. Israel has been relentlessly repeating, we need to destroy Hamas, we need to eradicate Hamas, whatever Hamas was, because clearly the political leadership has been eradicated. And still, because what they are really targeting is is Palestinian resistance, and we understand it when it shifted the focus from self-defense to self-determination. They are trying to suppress whatever the Palestinians represent now in the Gaza Strip, but in Palestine in general. And Palantir, the nerve, the CEO of this company has to say in public, yes, I mean to show intent, knowledge and purpose. Yes, I am giving the services of my company to Israel, but because Israel is killing terrorists. And the question is this man seeing the data? Because at this point, dozens of thousands of women and children have been killed. And in fact, from the very beginning, since October 2023, 70% of the victims have always been women and children. So who are the terrorists that he is helping Israel to kill? And the fact that these people have the nerve to state that shows the level of impunity that they know will enjoy. And the point is, if people do not understand what is at stake, this small window that we have to still stop the system will vanish, and we will remain entrapped in it. We will not have the tools to defend ourselves because they control the tools. That what we have seen with the arrival of with the beginning of Trump's administration, is that now there is an open concentration and lavish concentration of power in terms of control of weapons, control of algorithms, and control of wealth. Incredible, ostentatious wealth. All the others who do not have access to it would better wake up, get out of the light-struck sort of posture and realize what they have to do. We cannot sit idle where all this happens. And the Palestinians, yes, they offer a test today, but also a test for us to see what's going to happen because Palantir is continuing to sell its services to Western governments and others. So it's not just Israel.
Right. I mean, this is an economy built for export, right? I mean, and the reason why Tel Aviv Stock Exchange is booming is because it's selling these technologies, right, to the world.
Now, but to interrupt you on this, just for people to understand what we are talking about, because you don't need to be an economist or a mathematician to understand that there is something deeply wrong or deeply puzzling with a stock exchange that has amassed $220 billion, while the Israeli economy had started to nosedive. And just in the last month, meaning between the end of May and end of June, the gain of the Israeli stock exchange has been of $70 billion. Why? Because Israel has been selling to other countries in the period of the rush to rearming. What it has tested militarily and in terms of surveillance services and technology on the Palestinians in Gaza first and foremost. This is the world in which we live in.
Before we move on from Palantir and some of these other companies, one of the things that Alexander Karp, the CEO of Palantir, says is that Palantir is a company built for bad times. That's kind of their tagline. And what I've come to understand is that they think all our times are going to be bad. You know, that they're preparing for a future that really is apocalyptic, and this kind of apocalyptic imaginary has gripped many of the players involved. And you know, you've used the phrase that Gaza is apocalyptic in this moment, and I'm wondering if you're seeing a role of kind of an end times imaginary, whether it's religious or secular, that is powering some of this.
You know, I've been wondering, because the use of the term apocalyptic is something that I've realized carries a religious weight. And I wonder if they have not, I mean, especially the political forces who pride themselves of a religious identity are not salivating right now while Gaza is being destroyed, because this is what is preparing for the return of the Messiah. I don't know, but I can't believe how is possible on earth that there are human beings, mothers and fathers, who see what's happening to the children of Gaza and not have the urge, the impulse to stop it. So it's thinking that this is like a sacrificial moment where, yes, it's bad, but it is to happen because there is something else that waits for us, a post-apocalyptic scenario. This is how it feels sometimes, and it's shocking, but it's shocking but not surprising, because one who listens to certain politicians like Christian Zionists in Europe, in my own country, I didn't even know that they existed in my own country. But they are, in fact, embedded into institutional politics today. And it cuts across the Western world and goes beyond. Actually, it's also in the global South today. But they keep on talking about God, and in their like if they were really launching a message to the masses, which is scary. And we need to embrace, to return to reason and enlightenment, which has both a rational and spiritual component. Otherwise, we will end up in deep, deep darkness.
Francesca, I said in the introduction, that's what's really remarkable to me about this report. And I'm going to be teaching it in my graduate seminar next semester, because we in the university, we talk about these terms: settler colonialism, genocide, and what you've done is you have put the specifics, the facts, the figures to the process, the central process of displacement and replacement, right? So what we've been talking about is displacement, both in the form of killing and the form of forced relocation, and a large part of your report is focused on that. But then it turns to replacement, what comes after, the replacing of one people with another. And of course, there are economics attached to that. So I want to talk about what you used the term ungrounding. So first, if you can define it, and talk about some of the companies like Caterpillar, Hyundai, who you name, who are part of remaking the very earth, the very ground, for the replacing.
Yeah. Look, settler colonialism is a term that has made full sense to me as I started to engage with Palestine as from the perspective of the law of self-determination, because in its simplest form, settler colonialism is taking the land and resources of another people while displacing and replacing them. So normally there's a metropolitan power which pushes out the indigenous, segregates them and uses them, exploits them, but it takes first and foremost their land and resources. And without the inch of a doubt, this is what Israel is doing in the occupied Palestinian territory. We don't even need to go and unravel history and what has happened to Palestine since the arrival of Zionism into historical Palestine when it was under British mandate. And the thing is that I saw, and then I explained how the private sector gets hand in hand with it. Like Caterpillar and Hyundai, for example, have been used to through the excavation, machinery, and other kind of equipments that have allowed. Once through the weapons Palestinians have been threatened, displacement has allowed to segregate them, to build fences around them, or to build an infrastructure that would allow the settlers to move while the Palestinians to be confined. And of course, this machinery has been used also to rebuild. And it's a vicious cycle, because then you see now in Gaza, these machinery like Caterpillar, Hyundai and Volvo, which for us, think of Hyundai, I think more like motorcycles. Think of Volvo, and I imagine the car which is safety for a family on 4 wheels par excellence. Well, these are the logos that Palestinian children will associate to the destruction and the pulverization of what the bombs had already destroyed. The reason why I use the term ungrounding, and in fact I borrowed it from forensic architecture, which used it in their report Cartography of a Genocide, is because there is an element of erasure of the Palestinian presence that goes down until the really underground to deprive the people of the capacity to sustain themselves. Think of the extractivism, but think also of the foundations of new cities and roads. And so there is a changing, an enforced changing of the landscape and environment. And of course, look, if you look at the United States or many Canadian cities, you can see that indigenous people, while being there, exist as individuals, but they've lost that capacity, their collective reality, their attachment to the land, to the rivers, to the trees, to the forest, has been ungrounded. And this is why I think that we need to understand, and through a legal prison, it's possible, that the ultimate victim through a genocide is the right of a people to exist as a people, is the right of self-determination.
And to sever that relationship to the land, and it's not only a process of moving people from the land, it's also a process of changing the land itself.
Absolutely.
And so when we hear, like, I think Zeteo viewers and listeners are familiar with these bulldozers destroying homes and orchards, but I think what I really want to stress is extraordinary about the report and worth reading in full is that it is not just a list of these acts. It puts them inside this infrastructure, inside the system, and so we understand the role that each are playing. And just before we move on from this, I one of the most chilling things I've heard in recent months, and we've all heard a lot, was when Donald Trump repeatedly refers to Gaza as a demolition zone when he's talking about why he should turn it into a tourist resort, right? That he says, well, it's a demolition zone, which, this is the language of construction. So I'm just wondering what your observations are about the story he's telling.
Absolutely, he knows. I mean, look, in the entire abomination that the political discourse is to sensible and principled human being, we have to recognize to this president to tell the truth. He tell it the way it is. So this is what he has heard, and this is what he repeats. Gaza is not just the site of a genocide. To his ears, it is a demolition zone because Israel and those who are behind Israel have a clear plan. So they're already referring, but this dates back to October 2023. It's in October 2023 that 1 week after the tragic events of October 7 and what followed, I heard Israeli leaders and other commentators referring to the need to move the Palestinians to other secure places where they could have access to water and infrastructure and education and homes. And then I realized that they were already planning the creation of new settlements in Gaza. And this discussion has been completely normalized. So I think that to someone like President Trump, this is totally obvious. It is to happen, and is not someone who wastes time. So he wants to see the results. Let's call it for what it is. And so, Naomi, if you allow me, it's interesting how companies, this is why if there is one takeaway that I'd like Zeteo's audience to go away with, is that companies justify themselves and make excuses for themselves by saying, but we are just selling machines to Israel. What do we know about the use? So the question is, the paradox is, so Volvo should be responsible for the possible criminal use that someone makes with this car? No, but here we are not talking of private individuals over whose conduct eventually the state is responsible or as an oversight. Here we are talking of Volvo having a licensee which operates inside a country which commits crimes after crimes, and the occupation is criminal, is a criminal enterprise. So due diligence imposes on Volvo and all other companies not to engage with Israel as long as it maintains an apartheid regime and an economy of occupation which has now turned genocidal.
Before we move on from this replacement economy, I want to talk about some even more familiar names like Airbnb, Booking.com. You know, this is obviously less an issue in Gaza right now than it is in the West Bank, but the report is about both. What role are these types of companies playing in this system that you're charting here?
Yeah, so Airbnb, Booking.com, and other tourism platforms advertise nice neighborhood, tranquil neighborhood in the colonies, inside the colonies in the West Bank, including colonies whose residents are active harassers of the Palestinians day and night. So not only the properties they advertise as lovely and nice neighborhoods are on stolen land, on stolen property, but also they are connected to areas that are active settler colonial frontiers where the settler keep on pushing out the Palestinians. And so there are two levels of responsibility for companies like these ones, the online tourist platforms. First of all, Israel is committing crimes in the entirety of the occupied Palestinian territory. So we need to be able to visualize the occupied Palestinian territory as one, what remains of historical Palestine, inside which Israel was created, even if if this land has been fragmented. But legally, politically, they do constitute one entity, one territorial unity. So what happens in Gaza has an impact on the legal status of Israel inside the occupied West Bank. So even if Airbnb and the others are not engaged in a criminal activity such as the settlements itself, what they're doing in Gaza would be enough to disengage. But all the more they continue to stay engaged in this critical time, and they even try to hide because they have made the accessibility to their adverts more and more difficult, but they're still there. And this is why they can be held accountable judicially, and there are already responsible lawyers and citizens who have taken action against them, because profiting from the income of a criminal activity in a number of jurisdictions is money laundering at the domestic level. but also, there is the possibility of consumers and users themselves. I mean, I used to be a big Airbnb and Booking.com user. For the past 16 months, I've not used it. And now I'm going to discontinue my account. And I encourage others to do the same. Do that for 2-3 months. If this is the most modest thing you do, please do this sacrifice. So in order to help and to show the Palestinians that together we can make sure that forces operating in the market can be more principled and less. I mean, the financial risk needs to come from ethics instead of profits.
So, I mean, that's something that when it comes to these consumer-facing companies, that's something that people can do. But I want to stress again, this is your lawyer and you're building a legal case against these companies. You're talking about money laundering. You're talking about very, very serious crimes, and you're outlining exactly all of the statutes that are being violated internationally and pointing to national ones as well. So you have been facing a very severe backlash since this report came out. You've never been very popular in certain circles, of course, very popular in others. But I think things have escalated in a way that can't be disentangled from the fact that you are naming names of some of the most powerful companies in the world. And you are naming consequences. You are saying this is a prosecutable offense. What are you dealing with right now? I mean, we have the U.S. Calling openly for you to be fired. I know you always say it's not about you. We understand that. But talk about how you understand this escalation of the attacks on your role.
Yeah. Honestly, I find the fact that an administration, let alone someone in the government, let alone that then was probably the most powerful state in the world, has the nerve to put black on white that an unpaid UN official represents a threat to the world economy is laughable. I mean, let's be honest. What is in my power that represents a threat to the global economy? And so let's unpack it. It's not me. It's international law that represents a threat to the lawless economy that some states are pushing for, because this is what we are talking about. Endless profits, one people enriching itself while another perish, and this is unacceptable, and the law stands against it. Where I say Palestine is a test, but what does it say? That while there are guiding principles establishing that companies are responsible for their conduct and the human rights impact it has, it means that companies need to run a due diligence in general and ensure that they are not directly linked, they are not contributing to, and they are not causing human rights impact. The threshold is very low. So already decades ago, companies enmeshed with the occupation had been put on notice through the documentation coming from Palestinian, Israeli human rights organizations and others, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the UN. They should have pulled out. The fact that they have stayed involved creates a direct link. But now that we know that Israel maintains an occupation which is unlawful, amounts to racial discrimination and apartheid, that violates the right of self-determination of the Palestinians, that is a tool to further annex their territory and entrench permanent occupation. And at the time there are proceedings for war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide against Israel. This is more than direct link, especially when then we go and we look at each company. And Naomi, each company that I put on notice has received a legal analysis, which I've not published, but it's there. And I've challenged them, linking the facts, what they do, their conduct, to specific violations, maybe in some cases for the extractive industry being participating in pillage, which is a war crime. And when it comes to the arms and the technology industry, contributing or causing extermination and or extrajudicial killings, and even possibly genocide, since they act, some of them, with knowledge, intent, and purpose. So the legal framework is very clear, and this is why it can provoke such an awakening that Naomi, I've never seen the Human Rights Council so responsive and passionate about anything like about this report. There have been 2 rounds of applauses, which is not absolutely common. Why? Because many of them had never realized, had never seen the picture of the occupation and how profitable it is. And this awakening is dangerous because it can push people out of this sodalist that is proving so dangerous for all of us.
Yeah, it provides all of these other levers that we might pull. But I'm really struck, Francesca, listening to you and looking at the backlash, that the economy that you are tracking here with this report, that you're laying out, is incompatible with the existence of international humanitarian law. And I think that this crisis is really now coming to a head where these players understand that if they're going to continue to pillage, if they're going to continue to make these super profits off of automated weapons, off of grabbing resources from occupied territories, whatever it is, international law itself can't really exist. Like Peter Thiel, who founded Palantir, he says that he thinks maybe Greta Thunberg is the Antichrist. I've said this before, but I really think you should understand, we should take them at their word that their idea of the apocalypse is the enforcement of international law, right?
Totally. Absolutely.
And so the attacks on you, I think, have to be understood within that context. Before we lose you, and I know you have more asses to kick out there, and people are starting to whisper in your ear. Zeteo was founded in part because of the failures of the mainstream media in the face of the genocide. That's its backstory in many ways. And I've been noticing, as I've been watching interviews with you, that you're starting to get increasingly impatient with some of the denialism that you're facing from journalists, and saying, there is another industry out there that needs to be investigated for complicity in this genocide, and that's your industry, the media.
Yeah. I will do that.
Just before we lose you, what are your plans in that area? I mean, it's not a joke; it's real.
No, it's real. It's real. And look, it's not even the first time. I mean, I've been reading about that already. There is an Italian historian, but surely there are more who have unpacked the role of the media one century ago during the Nazi fascist genocide, the way the Jewish people and others were projected, and this has been part and parcel, a vehicle of their dehumanization. In the jurisprudence concerning the Rwanda genocide and the genocide in former Yugoslavia, the role of the media, as well as the role of the corporate sector, is spotlighted because they have been vehicle amplifiers of genocidal messages. What is critical here is that it's not just been Israeli media. And in fact, in Israel, we have had courageous journalists like those at Local Call and 972, first and foremost, and also some in Haaretz, who have exposed the reality for what it was. But Western corporate media, even today, continues to platform genocide deniers and those who are committing genocide, giving them a platform while silencing, smearing, and blaming those who have lost hundreds of family members. But so my plan is for the next report to look at what states have done to comply with the ICJ advisory opinion, which imposed them to disengage from the occupation, not to recognize it, not to aid and assist it, and particularly what they have done through trade and arms transfer. And then I want to look at the media. So I truly hope that in 2026, I will have time and resources to investigate the role of the media in enabling this genocide.
Well, Francesca, thank you so much. I've noticed in these interviews that when you mention this report coming out about the media, the journalists end the interviews very quickly. I'm doing this because you have to go. It's been such a pleasure and an honor to be in conversation with you. Thank you so much for your work, and thanks for coming on Zeteo.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to Zeteo.com. Your support matters.
There is a backlash happening in the U.S. against all of this horror show, this unprecedented horror show that we've been witnessing. This, everyone's having nightmares, seeing just the most horrible images they've ever seen in their lives. Donald Trump came into office promising an end to this. He really did. He went to Michigan promising Muslims and Arabs that he would end this slaughter. He also promised an end to the Ukraine proxy war, and he's obviously not delivering. And as I said, Jeffrey Epstein has become symbolic of all the betrayals. Now Donald Trump is seeing a 54-point drop in support from the youth. Trump's approval trends among ages 18 to 29. This is an interactive poll. In early February, 55% approval from young people 18 to 29. That's unusual for a Republican. Historically, the Democrats usually commanded the youth, but Donald Trump had managed to channel their support. Just a few months later, in July, only 28% approval, 72% disapproval, a 54-point negative swing. I think Gaza is a very important factor there. It's a very important factor on the right. It's a very important factor on the left. But the biggest swing has obviously been on the right. The biggest swing is among the most visible figure in QAnon. Jake Angeli Chansley. Remember the QAnon shaman from January 6th? Oh yeah, and F Israel and F Donald Trump. This is the guy who was like laying down his life, who went to jail in a riot motivated by the belief that the election had been stolen by Donald Trump, who was going to jail the supposed pedophile elite. Now he's not only calling out Trump, he's calling out Israel. So Trump has even lost the QAnon shaman. We saw what happened at TPUSA, Turning Point USA, the astroturfed youth group of Charlie Kirk, whose entire career, starting from the time when he was basically a conservative child actor, I've never known him to hold a real job, was funded by pro-Israel billionaires, by Zionist billionaires. And we saw a debate take place at TPUSA over Israel for the first time. We saw Tucker Carlson accuse Jeffrey Epstein of having been a Mossad agent, leading to threats and recriminations from Israeli officials, threats against Charlie Kirk himself, and now his organization seems to be in some kind of chaos, which is why he announced on behalf of donors. I mean, he openly said, I'm having, I'm doing this for donors as well as our own supporters. And who are those donors? Focus groups with conservative student leaders who are being groomed by TPUSA, and he's talking to them about their views on Israel, because this has become a huge crisis for him personally and for his organization. It's a crisis because he cannot square the contradiction between the conservative or right-wing youth base and the donors who have paid the bills for his organizations. And it's just a very weird MK Ultra type scene where you can see him trying to guide his the next generation of conservative youth, where he's sort of supposed to be the senior elder in the bridge between the donors and the doers. He behaves in a very strange way.
Does that resonate with you?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
You're not anti-Israel. You don't wish them harm. You're not, like cheering on Iran.
No, I support Israel. I think they're our ally. I want them.
He's like guiding them, like telling them what they're supposed to think while allowing them to have some criticism. It actually reminds me of going to seminars headed by liberal Zionist groups where they were dealing with this same phenomenon among progressive Jews in cities like New York 10, 15 years ago. This is the same thing that happened with Jews is now happening within the conservative movement.
You would be called an anti-Semite by some people for saying this.
And I think that's ridiculous. I don't hate Jews because I think a nation should defend themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like, I think that's the most ridiculous thing ever.
I feel like it's becoming like the word racism. Like, we just disagree with them, so we just have to call them a name. I don't think they're actually anti-Semitic. I think people just can't agree with them and they can't prove them wrong, so they just throw a word out and be like, you're anti-Semitic because you think that we should stop sending our money there.
Something that I see amongst the people I'm around, I do see more like general disdain towards, just being honest, Jewish people. Just because they're constantly being told that you hate Jews. And it's like, fine. If you're going to say I hate Jews over and over and over again, like, if I'm going to be convicted of the crime, I might as well do the crime. I fear the same thing happens with all the talk of race. The more we talk about it, the more we read about it, the more racism actually happens.
All right, this is a strange reaction from Charlie Kirk. Very strange.
This is like, I try to tell them, thank you for saying this, like, because like, I try to tell these people and they're like, we must get more aggressive. And so like, let me ask a question. If we were to
he said, I try to tell these people, who's he talking about? And I've seen him mocked for trying to like emulate Tucker's mannerisms, but you have to read between the lines. He's saying, I try to tell them. He's talking about his donors, ultra-Zionist donors, the ones who sent him to Israel. And he's trying to he's admitting that he is counseling them on how to suppress the rage among youth about what Israel is doing, because it's now affecting white youth. The whites are starting to get a little bit angry about what's happening.
Like if people said what Tucker said is anti-Semitic, I don't hold that view, but it's like a lot of people on Twitter are like calling us out and like, whatever, that's not going to happen. But
he mentions Tucker while he's sort of acting like Tucker.
If we were to cancel Tucker, would anti-Semitism increase or decrease?
I think increase, because that means any supporter of Tucker Carlson's statement therefore makes them anti-Semites.
Association.
100%. Exactly.
But the binary that's presented is that if you don't passionately talk about it, you are a hater. That's probably destructive for everybody involved. So for me, I'm trying to find this new path, which is, I love Israel. I visited there. My wife and I had the best experiences ever. I saw where Jesus rose from the dead and he walked on water. But also,
you could actually see that without Israel being there. But anyway,
American, and I represent a generation that can't afford anything, and that we are like flooded with illegals, and no one speaks English, and our hospitals are clogged. I think we need to have the prudence to reject the Jew hate. Like, okay, we're not going to put up with that. That's dumb. But also, if you call everyone an anti-Semite, if they don't take a puritanical view of the Netanyahu government, then I think it's bad for everybody.
So would you guys all basically safe to say welcome us not talking about Israel nearly as much?
So basically what's happening here is there are pro-Israel groups and donors who are monitoring these youth and analyzing them. They're basically under surveillance here, and they're trying to come up with new messaging for the AstroTurf Con Inc. wing. It looks like Charlie Kirk is sitting next to sort of the manager who has been appointed by the donors, and they're asking them, would you agree to just talk less about this? If we told Zionist elements to stop calling you all anti-Semites, would you agree to just tone it down a little bit? And would you agree to attack anti-Semitism in exchange for not being branded anti-Semites? They're trying to come up with new messaging. They're trying to come up with new maneuvers. They're trying to do everything except something material to actually stop the killing and stop the apartheid and stop the occupation. And they're mainly trying to prevent an exodus from the Con Inc. AstroTurf wing to more radical elements within the right. I don't think these youth will go left. Some of them might go left, but I think for cultural reasons, they're just not going to go left. But you can see the crisis this is causing on the right. And the left is Israel has completely lost the left. And when I say the left, I don't just mean the kind of professional activist elements or the traditional radical left. I'm talking about, increasingly like the progressive managerial class, like more like the yuppie progressives who are getting more and more aware of what's happening in Palestine and also see it as the moral cause of our time. I was in New York earlier this week. I got out of Penn Station, walked, I guess there was like a Wu-Tang concert in Madison Square Garden, walked past the t-shirt, guys selling t-shirts of Ghostface Killer. It was a real like throwback to the 90s. And then I saw the future straight ahead. I saw this giant procession going up 7th Ave. Was it 7th Ave or 6th Ave? Of Palestinian flags and signs protesting the genocide. I didn't even know this march had been taking place, and they had marched from Union Square. They were marching uptown to 42nd Street. So I joined them, and I mean, I'll show you what it looked like. I talked to some of the more veteran activists and organizers, and what they said is, we're noticing a lot more normies showing up, a lot more people who are just like day-to-day workers out here who weren't from our activist circles are showing up, and they're disgusted with the starvation, they're disgusted with the famine. It was a very large march, and I mean, think about it. This is 650 days into the genocide, and people are still coming out. Some new people are joining these ranks, and while marching with them around Midtown New York, I would see people come out of their offices, people wearing their work clothes, to give thumbs up, to clap for them, to cheer for them. Cars were honking their horns to a chorus of Free, Free Palestine. Vendors were cheering. The only people on the street who were upset by this display were members of Beitar, who came and tried to antagonize and terrorize the march, and they were completely outnumbered. So something is happening on the left, something is happening on the right. The only thing that's holding it off is the lack of democracy in this country, just the complete lack of democracy, which has resulted in only 18 Democrats signing on to a resolution condemning Israel's policy of starvation.